Welcome into this week's edition of AWA Unleashed. We the self-proclaimed preeminent #1 podcast dedicated to telling the stories and reliving the memories of the American Wrestling Association. This is part 2 of a 3-part series reliving some of the most memorable moments of All-Star Wrestling. And I can't do that without my 2 tag team partners, a couple guys that know all about the gimmicks, Mick Karch and Joe Chupik. Last week's episode was so well received that I'm glad that we broke this into 3 because we wanted to do 2, but I feel like 3 is really probably better off and where it should lay when it's all said and done.
Absolutely. And like we said last week, we could do 300. You know, there's so many memories of AWA All-Star Wrestling, but, you know, we're hitting, 10, 12 over these each of the 3 episodes, and today is going to be a good one. And last week, like you said, Chris, so well received, and we love the feedback. We love the positive feedback, and here we go, sharing some more memories.
Well, and you brought up that we could do 300. That's just on the old studio matches. We haven't even gotten into, I'll say, the mid 80s.
Oh,
yes,
and beyond. Some of them we don't want to remember. Whitewater. But,
we're doing a Whitewater watch along, if you can say that.
Oh, man. Just give
me
do it so I can poke my eyes out.
No, it's going to be Patreon. That's going to be our first Patreon thing. We're going to do a Whitewater watch along.
Yeah, interesting. Now, Patreon, that's the tequila that I have to drink before we do Whitewater, right?
No, that's Patron.
Ah, okay. Well, it's Patreon in Polish. That's what I'm doing.
If you're going to do Whitewater, you might as well pour me a shot of battery acid.
A Whitewater? Is that what you're saying?
You're
going to drink some white water to watch Whitewater.
Perfect.
Okay, so before we get to that, you can see the graphic for 7th Avenue Pizza, one of our fantastic sponsors. If you're a big fan of pizza, and that's why I've got the camera from the neck up because, body by pizza, that's what we say. 7thAvenuePizza.com. Great on the grill. Now that we are smack dab in the middle of grilling season, that's how I have mine. Absolutely fantastic. Also, if you're looking to rep the AWA Unleashed Army, because that is the gimmick that I'm giving ourselves, and I think it sounds kind of cool, but that's what I'm saying. You can rep the AWA Unleashed Army with the swag from SodaStick, sodastickco.com. We've got the black and white AWA Unleashed t-shirt. We've still got the hoodies that are going to be coming back come fall that you can get your name personalized, and they're fun. They're great to have. They're really lightweight, but yeah, that's what we've got coming up. So thanks to SodaStick, and also thanks to 7th Avenue Pizza. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get right into it. Part 2 of this, the first one that I've got here, Mick, tell me about Tiny Mills and Mad Mountain Campbell.
All right. Again, there's probably a handful of us old timers still out there that go back to the 1960s with the AWA. And this would have been really right after the AWA started, 1960, 1961. There's Tiny Mills, and I've referenced him before. Henry Middlestep was his actual real name. Tiny Mills, one half of the very first AWA Tag Team Champions, along with our good friend Stan Crusher Kowalski. And Tiny was involved in a feud with a man by the name of Man Campbell. And just to put into context, Man Campbell was kind of one of these scuffling hillbilly kind of guys. That was the wrestling style. You can see him there, barefoot, ready to go. Man Campbell, for historical reference, transformed into Luke Brown.
God, he looks like an action figure. Like when they're in the packaging, he's like,
yeah, absolutely. The original action figure, Man Campbell. He wrestled as Luke Brown, and Luke Brown was a tag team partner of Jake Smith. They were the Kentuckians, and of course, Jake was the father of Jake the Snake Roberts, Grizzly Smith.
Okay, I was gonna ask if there was a connection there because I heard the Smith name, and that's where I instantly think.
Yep, and so that was Man Campbell was in the early days, and then transformed into Luke Brown. the situation with Tiny Mills, and again, we put this in historical perspective, where there weren't a lot of crazy angles on television.
Mm-hmm.
They would do them periodically in that studio. And this one was kind of bizarre if you really think about it and legitimize it in your head. Manmon Campbell is in the ring and he's being interviewed by Marty O'Neill. They used to do, even before they went to the interview backdrop, they did the interviews in the ring. And Marty's standing there, and Tiny Mills has the feud with Man Mountain Campbell. As Man Mountain is delivering his promo, Tiny Mills comes into the ring with a hammer and hits Man Mountain Campbell on the back of the head. It looked pretty damn good. Now, I would assume it was probably the television angle, the angle of the camera.
Do you feel like they would have used a gimmicked hammer, or was it a real hammer?
It was a hammer. It was a real hammer. I don't even, I don't think it was any kid's hammer. I'm sure that Tiny knew what he was doing where he hit Man Mountain, but I'll tell you what, and it wasn't just a little tap, but wham, hit him over the head with a hammer, and Man Mountain Campbell hit the deck, and of course the studio audience went absolutely apeshit. But again, remember, ladies, this is long before Crash TV, long before there were 100 different angles and run-ins and everything else every week. So this was pretty intense and pretty bizarre at the time.
Well, was Tiny part of Murder Incorporated yet?
He was. Tiny was part of Murder Incorporated, and I believe eventually old Henry Middlestead became the sheriff, I believe, in Malacca County. So certainly he had a career after wrestling, brought in as a troubleshooting referee for the AWA in the 1960s, 70s, 80s. So, and Man Mountain Campbell, again, I said his claim to fame was Luke Brown, part of the Kentuckians, along with Grizzly Smith. So there's an early one for you, AWA All-Star Wrestling.
A lot of these are earlier ones, Nick. The next one I want to bring up, and again, this is before Chris and I's time, but Gene Kanisky and some guy who did okay in his career, Vern Galya.
Gene Kanisky, the only man, we've said this so many times, to hold both the AWA and the NWA singles world championships, not simultaneously, but Gene did that. He is the only one. He and Vern Ganya actually were pretty close buddies outside the ring, but in the early 1960s, their feud was extraordinary. Here in the AWA area, took it all over the horn, including Metropolitan Stadium and places like that. Big Gene was the real deal. And there he is. There's old Vernsky, in one of the incarnations of the AWA championship belt. Here's the angle that they did on television. And I've referenced this before, and again, put it in context. This is back in the day, black and white TV. Vern had his line of vitamin products. One of them was Geralac, which was kind of was a liquid vitamin to go along with his other vitamin supplements. And Vern was doing an in-ring commercial, I believe, for Geralac with Marty O'Neill. And he's in the midst of this feud with Gene Kanisky. And Gene comes in the ring and attacks Vern. He hits him from behind, whatever. Vern hits the deck. And despicable, Gene takes the Geralac bottle, takes a swig of the Geralac, the liquid vitamin, and spit it all over the prone carcass of Vern Galya. So, even in this day and age, you go to the spitting level, you're taking it to another point.
It's personal animosity when you spit on somebody. It's like one of the worst things that you can do.
There it is. And again, you're going back, 65, 70 years for this. Yeah. And it got over big time and served to sell tickets. But as a kid, that's one of the things that I remember is, my God, this is pretty awful stuff.
Wow, Big Thunder really laid it into Vern on that one, huh?
He certainly did. He certainly did. That might have been the only bottle of Geralac that somebody ever used. by the way.
I do not want to be the guinea pig for that. No, thank you. Next one we've got on the list is man of 1,000 moves or holds, Billy Robinson and the legendary Kobayashi.
Two of the best of all time, no question right here.
Yeah.
No question. Chris, you nailed it. And this is when Billy Robinson arrived in the AWA area. This is 1971, I believe. And Kobayashi had already established himself as a real big deal around here. He was managed by Stan Crusher Kowalski. Of course, they called him the Big K at the time. And Kobe had already had title matches with Vern Ganya and so on and so forth. And let's take a look at him. There he is, the late Shozo Kobayashi. Terrific guy outside the ring. This is towards the end of Kobe's run here in the AWA, if I recall. And it was Billy Robinson's debut. I was in the studio. Nobody knew who Billy Robinson was at the time. I mean, if you followed wrestling and the wrestling magazines, then you knew who he was. But he was a newcomer to the AWA, gets into the ring on television to wrestle Kobayashi and beats him. And the interesting setup was that Kobe recognized, according to the storyline, who Billy Robinson was. And he's ranting and raving and he's screaming to Stan Kowalski in Japanese. He doesn't want to wrestle this guy. Nobody knew why. But Billy Robinson defeated Kobayashi. And I believe Billy's next victory on TV was over Blackjack Lanza. So it was a hell of a way to get Billy Robinson indoctrinated into the AWA. Great, great stuff.
Well, one thing that I'm pretty sure I never heard said to Billy Robinson was there's going to be fines and suspensions from the late, great Wally Carbo. But there's a situation on All-Star Wrestling where Ivan Putzky was in the interview area and, Wally was brought in to translate for Marty O'Neill to, I believe it was Marty, was it not?
It was Marty, yes.
Okay, so Marty O'Neill calls in Wally Carbo to help translate what Ivan Putzky was saying. Ivan Putzky being a Pole, of course, one of my favorites growing up. I understood everything that he said, but apparently Wally didn't. But Mick, take it from there and tell us what happened in this interview.
Well, it's kind of interesting because, Wally, of course, of Polish descent himself. So, there's certainly, lineage there. Ivan Putzky, who, of course, was Joe Bednarski out of Texas. So he was about as, un-English acclimated as who knows who. But Wally was brought in because Marty couldn't quite understand what Ivan was trying to grunt and get across. And Marty O'Neill wanted to know how much Ivan Putzky weighed. Well, and Ivan didn't understand him. He could have been saying, what do you have for dinner? Or what do you watch on television? So they brought in the erstwhile Wally Carbo, Mr. Interpreter. And Wally, in his best Polish, said to Ivan Putzky, "How much do you weigh?" Which Ivan understood. That's the amazing thing. And I don't speak Polish, so I'm guessing if you have a certain inflection, Joe, you're the expert here. If you say it in a certain way, even if you don't understand the words, you'll understand what's being asked of you. Is that correct?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go to Google Translate. Or type in how much you weigh in English, put it over to Polish, and it does not come out how much you weigh.
I'm not sure if Wally thought he was Italian or German or Polish or Swahili. But nonetheless, Ivan understood it, and I believe he said something like 300 pounds or 270 or whatever it was. But that was Wally's. Thank God Wally was there to interpret.
Well, we brought it up in previous episodes about Wallyisms, and that fits right in with Uncle Milty, Wally Carbo.
How much do you weigh?
I really wish that we had the video, but again, you guys, for those that are wondering why we don't own the video. We can't legally play it. So if you want, you can go to YouTube. You could probably go to Peacock, although I don't know how much you could find on there, even though WWE owns the rights. But go to YouTube for a lot of this stuff. You could probably find some version of it. But as much as we would love to play the videos legally, we cannot. So I just want to put that out there, because you're talking about the Wallyisms. It would be great to have a show we just play the videos and then, but we just can't do it, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, the Wallyisms extend to the stuff that happened off camera as well. It wasn't an act that Wally was doing. That was just Wally, and it extended into The Office and into traveling and legendary.
Is there enough meat on the bone for a Wallyisms show?
Yeah, you got the whole butcher shop. Let alone meat on the bone. There are some stories about Wally Carbo, and I mentioned this before. You look at him and you think, this guy's a ladies' man. I'm telling you, there was a port in every storm that Wally would work his way through. His prowess is legendary, and we'll just leave it at that for now.
Well, we'll do that coming up down the road. How about that?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. The next one, Joe, I feel is one that it resonates with maybe older fans and younger fans as well. And I put myself on the younger end of that spectrum.
Yeah, so the next one is Mr. Saito and the Incredible Hulk Hogan. Saito came out to present Hogan with this big, huge trophy, and Hogan accepted it. And then that dastardly Japanese wrestler, Masa Saito, decided that, there's something not right here. So he decides to take this trophy and attack Hulk Hogan. It puts a big beat down on Hogan. Of course, that sets up the next angle for Hogan, which, by the way, this followed up from Super Sunday. And as a side note, it never really brought me in because I still wanted Nick Bockwinkel and Hulk Hogan, not Mr. Saito and Hulk Hogan. One of the things that happened that didn't really get promoted or stated online is that Hogan actually got pierced a little bit from the broken trophy that Saito just used to attack Hulk Hogan. Hogan actually got, shall we say, stabbed. Nothing major, nothing really bad, but he legitimately got hurt in that altercation, shall we say.
Well, it's interesting too. There was kind of Saito's foray into the AWA too. So people had heard of him, but here he's going to present Hulk Hogan. He's going to honor him. Well, of course, the first thing they do is they bow to each other. And when Hogan leaned forward to bow, he got the salt in the eyes. And then, Saito took the trophy and he hit Hogan in the chest as well. And as I recall, they even made some money on that because Hogan was gone for a little while. And there were some T-shirts printed up that said something about one scar, 1 million outraged fans or something like that. So they did market it, but that was again variation on an old theme. The dastardly Japanese invader throwing salt in the eyes of the American.
And from a time perspective, that was pre-McDonald's.
Yes, it was. Whatever you mean by that,
Yeah, you know what I mean.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Well, I don't. Come on, don't tell me inside jokes.
Oh, just quit kayfabing yourself.
Hey, just remember, secrets are lies that make baby Jesus cry. Okay, just remember that, you two.
We all know what happened when that McDonald's drive-through window.
Oh, that.
That
Oh, okay. I honestly wasn't getting it. I wasn't playing stupid. I am legitimately stupid.
Yeah, the
Well, that's why we
Waukesha.
work so well together.
That's right. You fit right in the Waukesha McDonald's. Yes, but at any rate, yeah, that was one of the most famous AWA on-screen altercations because of the time frame and just how big Hulk Hogan was here in the AWA.
That it was. That it was.
All right, let's go to the next one here, guys. Maybe one of our all-time favorites and a close friend of both of yours, Kenny J, maybe finally getting the rub.
Kenny J, going back to the 1960s, already had established the fact that Kenny J did not win very often on television, if ever. So you're going back, and I'm going to ballpark this, so don't make comments. You got to be accurate on your time frame. I'm going to say this was probably 1970, 1969, somewhere in that general vicinity. It's All-Star Wrestling, and Kenny J, it was kind of a throwaway, almost a standby match because it came at the end of the show. And Kenny was working another enhancement talent by the name of John the Greek. Now, it's not John the Greek Tolos, ladies and gentlemen. Believe me, this was not John Tolos. This was John the Greek. I didn't have a photo of John the Greek. He never made any of the AWA yearbooks, so that's the best.
You're a hell of an artist, man. That's did you draw that from memory? Because
I did. I drew it from memory, freehand, as they say.
Isn't that a photo from you and your toga party days back in college, Mick?
I don't remember them, but anyway, John the Greek. We talk about Hank Meadows on the previous show coming in at $1.20. John the Greek might have come in at $1.25, maybe $1.30. But at any rate, and I forget the finish. I don't know if Kenny rolled him up in a small package or what happened, but Kenny got the dude. There he is, Kenny J. God bless him. And I don't know if Kenny was expecting Marty O'Neill to call him to the interview area because it was the last match on the show. I think Kenny thought they were going home, turning out the studio lights. But all of a sudden, Marty says, "Come on in here. Come on in, Kenny J. You've won a match." Well, as I said to Kenny, 60 years after the fact, I have no idea what he said when he came out to be interviewed. He was so giddy and so ecstatic. It's like when somebody gets you an extra vodka, Chubik. You know, it's like
there's no such thing as an extra one. It's just the next.
The next one. Yeah. Kenny came into the interview area, and it was about as animated as I have ever seen Kenny J, and that includes when he pinned Adrian Adonis. Kenny is bouncing up and down, and he's saying something to the effect of, "Marty, think of my vote here. How may I tell it?" I assume that Kenny was saying, "This is a great victory. It's my first win on television." I'm not sure. He may have been calling Marty a name. He may have been ordering a pizza.
Is your dog barking, Mick?
The dog, yeah, and Kenny sounded a little bit like the dog. Barking there. Even the dog is wound up. But that's how excited Kenny J was over his victory over John the Greek. And my friend Jim Pouquet, that's for you, buddy, because you demanded that we talk about Kenny J's victory over John the Greek. Legendary, and again, the footage is gone. It's erased, never to be seen again, which is quite unfortunate.
So from a production standpoint, keep in mind that when this happened, Mick, you brought up about Kenny being, it appeared that he was surprised that he had to go and get interviewed. Well, this was at a time when All-Star Wrestling was live.
Yes.
Yep. And so thinking about the early 70s, it's not like a wrestling production today where you've got you've got multiple people in the background making sure that timing and everything is set. So this being a live show, my guess is that the finish happened too quick. They had time to fill. And it's like, well, what the heck do we do? Oh, let's bring in Kenny J for his first rambling. And I'm guessing that's what happened. In terms of how Kenny did that, first of all, I loved Kenny J. Okay, great guy. That was just sort of Kenny talking in general terms a lot of it. Nicest guy in the world. The eloquence on being able to talk on the mic may not have quite been there. Maybe that's why I didn't get the big push. But Kenny was in the spotlight for this match. Well deserved. I don't remember it. I was too young. I grew up thinking Kenny J just lost every single match. No, he did not. And this was not the only one that he won either.
That's correct. And again, maybe for historical reference, just to put Kenny over, let's just let people think it was John the Greek totals. Maybe we don't have to qualify it and say it was, John the Greek, who was actually Herb Schwartz from Milwaukee or whatever. But nonetheless, a feather in the cap of the Sodbuster.
Couple of guys that could do a promo pretty darn well is going to be our next little incident. Again, Mr. Vern Ganya and the dastardly masked man, Dr. X. Mick, you are all too familiar with both gentlemen and what happened on All-Star Wrestling.
It was such a great angle, and it was the old slow build, which they did to perfection back in the day. It wasn't hot-shotting an angle and going right into a main event on television like it is today. It was a slow burn, slow build. Dr. X, Dick Beyer, who of course had wrestled as the Destroyer all over the world, was coming into the AWA area, and this is in 1967. I believe it's August of 67. And the setup was that you have this masked man sitting in the audience at the TV studios for several weeks, just scouting the wrestlers, in particular Vern Galya. Now, we've mentioned this on the show before. In the real world, if you're doing a TV show and somebody's sitting there in a mask week after week, you escort them from the studio. You don't put the camera on them every week and say, who's this guy? But nonetheless, that's what they did with Dr. X. Eventually, the payoff came where he got into the ring. He climbed the top rope and jumped on the back of Vern Ganya while Vern was involved in a match, and that was Dr. X, Dick Beyer's introduction into the AWA area. That's how he made the splash. And originally, they called him just the Masked Man. Eventually, it transformed into Dr. X. I don't know. I've heard both why he didn't use the Destroyer name here. I believe it was because he was eventually going to be unmasked somewhere down the road, and he didn't want the Destroyer unmasked, so he went with Dr. X. I don't know if that was his idea, Vern's idea. I'm not sure. But nonetheless, he came out on TV and he said, do I have your attention now, Vern Ganya? And it was basically that kind of thing. Dr. X, of course, legendary, worked against the Crusher, Red Bastien, Billy Red Lyons, on and on and on for years and years. 1967 to 1970, he was here. He unmasked in St. Paul in 1970, came back a couple of years later as a bona fide babyface. But it was a great angle and a great way to introduce X to the TV crowd. And as I mentioned before, 1 week he couldn't make it. He had a commitment somewhere else. So they put shoulder pads on referee Marty Miller. Put shoulder pads and a suit coat on Marty Miller and a mask, and they had Marty sit in the crowd as the Masked Man. So the 1 week that Dr. X could not make it in, they found a suitable replacement, and it was referee Marty Miller. And, there's a story about that, too. I was in the studio, recognized it was Marty Miller, and being the smart-ass punk kid that I was, I started shouting, "Hey, it's Marty Miller," which did not ingratiate me either to Marty Miller, Vern Galya, Wally, Carbo, or anybody else. I was they didn't boot me out of the studio, but Marty Miller, it took him about 10 years to forgive me for that. But that is the legend of Dr. X in the AWA.
Yeah. So how was your relationship with Marty Miller? Like after once, how do you broach that subject with him? Like after, as you get older then?
I didn't say anything until I had known Marty for 15, 20 years and was working with him. And I said, hey, Marty, do you remember the time? And he said, was that you? He didn't remember that it was me that had done it.
He just remembered it had happened?
He remembered that it happened,
Okay.
and he said, I would have kicked the living shit out of you a long time ago had I known it was you. But, you know, the angle went over, no glitches, no nothing. The microphone didn't pick me up saying, hey, it's Marty Miller. And there you have it.
Mick, to the best of your knowledge, do you ever recall the angle as it played out, that another territory or even the AWA, had that ever been done before, to the best of your knowledge?
Right off the top of my head, I don't know. I mean, I would assume that something like that had probably been done. It seems like it's kind of tailor-made for wrestling. Mm-hmm. But again, what I want to emphasize to the modern day fan is you don't know how good a slow build was.
Yeah.
When it really meant something and you didn't hot shot an angle and boom, put together a tag match for your main event on Monday Night Raw. It was suspenseful and it was a build.
Well, what it reminds me of is when Hillbilly Jim with the WWF, they did the slow build. He was this big old country boy in the audience, and they did that slow build back when they still did do slow builds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, perfect. For the modern fan, for myself, and the whole Dr. X angle, yes, I was born, but I'm too young to remember it. So that I'm just equating it, trying to put a little bit of a perspective for some of the newer wrestling fans.
And in my mind, I'm thinking about it is you have this individual and he's just waiting and waiting and waiting, and you don't know who is he, what is he going to do.
Right.
And then he gets involved in Vern Ganya's match, and all of a sudden it's like, it's got that instant bad guy credibility at that main event level. And all of a sudden to me, I'm just kind of going through it in my mind. You've got this built-in villain that has got this credibility right away because he's come in and he waited and picked his spot.
He picked his spot. And as he said, what better way to make an impact than, if I'm going to be here, I'm going to go after the big dog right away. I'm going to go after Vern Galya. And that's the way they did it. And Joe, to your point, they did that with Mighty Igor. They had him sitting in the crowd just as a fan off the street in his big trench coat and everything else. And then eventually, they brought him into the storyline. So it's been done before, but this was just perfectly done with Vern and X.
One other thing about X, quick question. If I'm remembering correctly, wasn't his finishing move the figure 4 leg lock?
It was.
Okay.
Yeah, it definitely was. And, that played into a lot of storylines as well. If you can break my leg lock and so on and so forth. But legendary guy.
Here's the reason that I even brought that up in the first place. And this is how I first even started having memories of Dr. X. I've got one of my older brothers, 8 years older than me. So let's say it was 1970. I was 5 years old. He would have been 13. Guess who was on the receiving end of many attempted figure 4 leg locks?
Wow.
Yeah.
Did he ever get it right?
Remembering back, whether he got it right or not, I remember that it created a little bit of pain.
Did you reverse it and put your hand? Did you do
that?
No,
I kept reaching for the tag to the dog, but the dog wanted nothing. Not Mad Dog, like my dog, my little poodle at the time. He wanted nothing to do with my brother.
Gotcha. Sure wasn't you. All right, well, we've got two more here, and I know, Joe, they both involve maybe the patriarch of one of the all-time great Minnesota wrestling families.
The legendary, well, I think at the time he was still Pretty Boy Larry Hennig. Maybe he was just being introduced as Larry the Axe Hennig. But it was Larry Hennig and the High Flyers, which back at that time, you never would have thought this situation happened. And if I'm remembering this angle right, wasn't this the debut of the High Flyers on All-Star Wrestling, Mick? Is this the angle that we're talking about?
Joe, I don't know if it was the debut, but if not, they were pretty new as a tag team.
Yeah. And they were facing, wow, all you can say is going into it, you'd say that they'd be overmatched, but it was the High Flyers against a pretty good tag team, Mr. Slick Nick Bockwinkel and Ray the Crippler Stevens. And they had, they had this weasel in their corner by the name of Bobby Heenan. And tag team match on All-Star Wrestling. And I remember the match happening on TV, but I also remember using it in one of the AWA pay-per-views that we had done. And the unique thing about it is like the entire 2 out of 3 fall match and the whole angle and everything, it was like about a good 25 minutes, which was unheard of for a 1 hour All-Star Wrestling show. But the High Flyers, they took it to Nick and Ray, and Nick and Ray didn't quite like that, and neither did Bobby. And Mick, go ahead and tell us about the finish of that.
Well, this is one, that I did not see coming, because Larry Hennig had been feuding with the High Flyers pretty consistently, including his, streaking down the Nicollet Mall in his spandex as part of the storyline. But Larry, out of nowhere, the Heenan family, Bockwinkel, Stevens, and Heenan, are triple teaming the High Flyers, and it's all going to hell in a handbasket. And lo and behold, Larry Hennig comes into the ring. And again, ladies and gentlemen, you got to remember, Larry was such a heel at the time, and the Ganya Hennig feud had raged for years and years, up to and including Greg's involvement. This is, obviously way pre-Kurt Hennig. And Larry got in and basically cleared the ring of the Heenan family. And he actually wound up picking up Greg Ganya, carrying him out of the ring to save him from further damage. And in Larry's interview, he said, "That could have been my son. That could have been my boy out there. This kind of stuff can't happen. There's limits. I've done a lot of bad things, but this was way over the top, blah, blah, blah." And from that point on till the end of his career, Larry Hennig was a bona fide, tremendously popular babyface here in the AWA. Great setup, great storyline. Heenan had just come in as the manager for Bockwinkel and Stevens. And, he added fuel to that fire. But when you talk about the best of All-Star Wrestling, man, that's right up there.
And if I'm not mistaken, it was pre-Weasel days. He was still Pretty Boy, or no, not Pretty Boy. That was Larry.
He was Gorgeous Bobby. Gorgeous Bobby Heenan, and then that transformed into the brain. He was Pretty Boy Bobby Heenan elsewhere, but not here in the AWA area.
What I like about all this and kind of how you're telling me this transpired was that today's heels, it seems like there's one cut, right? You have a certain action if you're a heel. Here, it's like there's an underlying evil with the heel that another one doesn't like. It's almost like there's this undercurrent of dastardliness and a degree and a line that some won't cross, whereas today it just kind of shifts, from episode to episode. And I think that's in order to get somebody like Larry Hennig, and correct me if I'm wrong here, guys, at that point, to get somebody like Larry Hennig to be such a baby face, you have to make it so personal and so relatable to the fans that they can put themselves in Larry Hennig's shoes and not just believe what he says, but actually feel the emotion that's coming out of him.
That's it. And I think the son angle, like you said, Chris, the personal aspect of it, had it been just another guy getting beat up, on television, Larry Hennig, just sits there and watches it. But it becomes personal when it is the son of a wrestler. Larry can relate to it. And that's been the story for years in wrestling. There's always somebody more hated than you are. No matter how big a villain you are, there's always somebody that the fans hate more that they want you to take care of, and they know you can do it because you're that big tough guy.
And so we know that Curt Hennig and Larry Hennig are father and son. Just wanted to clarify something as well.
Yes, they are related. Yes,
correct. But the whole angle happened before Curt was even in the business. Curt was too young. He was, maybe in junior high school.
So do you feel like maybe this might? I'm glad you brought that up, Joe. Do you guys feel like this helped Curt when he came in to maybe give him that sympathy already because his dad stood up for him, or am I reaching too deep? Are we not making that connection yet?
I think what it was, fans probably forgot at that point, when Curt makes his debut at 6-7 years down the road.
Okay.
But had Larry Hennig not turned babyface, if Larry was still a heel and Curt debuts in the AWA, he's getting no sympathy. He's a Hennig. We hate Larry Hennig. So Larry being the babyface for all those years prior, that certainly played into Curt getting over right from the box.
Exactly. You hit it right on the head there, Mick.
Okay. Well, the last one also involves Larry Hennig, and I have no idea about this one. I have no idea. And Mick, this seems to be one that you're driving the bus with this one. Do you know about this one, Joe?
No, I know who's involved. I know certainly Larry the Axe Hennig, and the other side of this is Dave the Ring Guy. Mick, take it away.
Back in the 70s, the AWA had a habit of, if an established heel or babyface wanted to get into the ring with someone, and they were forced to pick a tag team partner, a lot of times they would go outside of wrestlers, like they did, to Paul Persman, for example. When Paul was a wrestler, but when he first got into the business, he was a rookie, and Blackjack Lanza and Nick Bockwinkel, even Larry Hennig would say, all right, if I got to team up with somebody, bring me this guy. Well, Dave the Ringman, Dave Mickelson, that's Dave on the left. And sadly, none of the three are with us anymore. Dave and, of course, Sherry Martel and Playboy Buddy Rose. Dave had worked for the wrestling office for many, many years, setting up, tearing down the ring. He was a, handyman, jack of all trades. Well, this goes to the high flyers again. Larry Hennig is forced to take a tag team partner against the high flyers. And Larry really isn't keen on the idea. So the storyline is that he's going to take this Dave the Ringman, the guy that sets up and tears down the ring. He's going to take him as his tag team partner because he's got to have a partner. Earlier on in the day, Larry had sat in the corner with Dave and just explained what they were going to do, the whole angle, and then you're going to come out and blah, blah, blah. Do not let anybody know that we talked about this prior. You got to be completely surprised by the fact that I'm going to pick you as a tag team partner. Push comes to shove. Larry's out there. If I have to take a tag team partner, come here, you. And Dave Mickelson just happens to be standing off camera. Larry brings him in, and Dave is looking at the camera, sad sack. And the first thing Larry says to him is, I don't know this guy from Adam. Have I ever talked to you before? And Dave says, yes, you talked to me this afternoon. That's first thing Dave said. And Marty O'Neill and Larry Hennig look at each other. And I remember this distinctly. Larry says, I want to get in the ring with the high flyers so badly, I'll even team up with this idiot who doesn't know where the hell he's at. So not only did Dave blow the interview and the promo spot, they didn't use him. The match never happened. I don't know if they inserted Paul Persman or somebody else, but Dave lost his spot and his chance at immortality. Can you imagine that? 3:00 in the afternoon, Larry says, don't tell anybody about this. And the first thing Dave Mickelson said, we talked earlier this afternoon. So, and it was, like Joe said, it was live television.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't even imagine, like, what was Larry's reaction? What was it? Just was he pissed? Was he sad?
He was fuming. He was just fuming because once they turned the camera off, I'm looking and Larry pulls Dave into the control room, and you can see the control room had a window, and Larry's got smoke coming out of his ears and his nose, and he's beat red. And that was it. Dave blew his opportunity, but etched in immortality for at least that one line on television. Yes, you talked to me earlier this afternoon. That's Dave Mickelson, Dave the Ring Man.
In hindsight, it was probably best that he wasn't Larry's partner in a match. With all due respect to Dave, the ring guy, stick to setting up the rings, Dave. He wasn't exactly wrestler material, shall we say?
No, he really wasn't. If round is a shape, he was in good shape. Dave.
He invented pizza or body by pizza.
Body by pizza.
That would have been disastrous. That would have been real serious.
I remember Dave. He was still setting up the ring for the AWA when I got there in '85, and he would come into the office before he'd need to go do his run of local towns and so forth. And he always had a pipe. Liked to smoke a pipe quite a bit. Would always come in and say hi to me and so forth. And I remember it was my godmother who actually got me. Her and my mom got me to be AWA fans, and she had this as well. But both she and Dave had summer teeth. Some are here, some are there. Not saying that's not a shot. I'm just saying that's how he was. Having the pipe in his mouth for all those years did some damage to his teeth.
Dave had a gap where he could have inserted a tailpipe in his mouth, let alone a smoking pipe. God love him. But, who knows? Maybe had he teamed up with Larry whipped him into shape, could have had a future world heavyweight champion. Look at David Arquette. It happens.
Apples and oranges. That's like saying you or I could have done something in the ring, Mick.
No, it isn't, because nobody buys that. Period.
Well, let's wrap it up then on that. This is part 2. We got one more. That would make next week part 3. Thanks to 7th Avenue Pizza. You want to have a body by Dave, body by pizza. Go to 7thAvenuePizza.com. You can put it on the grill. It's great. You like that?
The grill gimmick?
The grill gimmick. Yeah. The Grizel Gizimic. I believe I said it correctly.
You did.
Okay. We've also got Soda Stick. They've got some swag if you want it. You want the black and white t-shirt. We'll probably have other things. Oh, we got other things that we're kind of floating around. Coming up in 2 weeks, guys, we're going to have Troy Peterson on. And he's going to talk about the Dan Gable Luthez Museum in Waterloo, Iowa. I don't know if I said it right. My wife hates the way that I say Waterloo because I somehow put the emphasis on ooh. I don't know. Maybe it's, I don't know. Anyway, but I'm excited to get him on because there's a lot of things that maybe if you haven't heard about it or you're just interested in it, it's a great time. As a fan, it's something I'm really looking forward to talking to Troy about and just kind of what everything is all about and kind of telling him my experience because I could tell him it's the first time, first time last year. It was a lot of fun. So I'm excited to talk to Troy in a couple of weeks.
Troy's a hell of a guy, and he's the president of Impact Pro Wrestling.
Yep.
Down there in Waterloo. They put on a great show. He worked so damn hard, and this is a great event. Very much looking forward to talking with him.
I certainly hope I can make this one that weekend. I do have tentatively prior commitments for a production shoot. If that does not transpire, I definitely want this to be my first year to head down to Waterloo. There you go, Chris. But I'm looking forward to it. I've heard nothing but great things about it and how it is really the true professional wrestling Hall of Fame.
Absolutely it is. You nailed it.
Where are we going, you guys?
Waterloo.
Waterloo.